idea, the thought process back then is get as big as possible so that you can completely, totally dominate your market. And part of that is number of employees. Part of that is executive suite. And part of that is having the right name. So I've never been good at naming companies, but the thought from some people was that eGroups was a better name than ONEList, which I can agree with, I suppose.
How many users did the companies respectively have? Roughly.
I don't honestly remember. We had more. That's how we ended up with more of the company. I think we had maybe 1 million or 2 million users more than them, and we were growing faster. So that's how we. With every other metric in the company, they were bigger, but we had more users. So that's how, we ended. That's how you end up valuing the companies in this case. So, yeah, it was interesting.
One more question.
Sure.
So you raised $42 million. Do you remember what the post money was on that, approximately? Guessing, 150 or better, or not?
I'm going to guess that, but I don't remember.
Okay, and then acquired for 400.
Acquired, I think when it was announced it was 450, and then it trended down to 400.
Okay.
Yeah.
But still, at least, upside for the investors based on the post money to what you acquired at, probably 3x, 2-3x roughly. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So,
yeah. Okay. Anyway, we're getting into the details there.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
At least there is still money on the table. I know you were acquired December 2000 or?
It closed August of 2000.
Okay, and at the time, I guess markets were still feeling sort of happy, but there was definitely thunder on the horizon, right?
No.
No?
So we filed our S1 in March of 2000, and that was 2 weeks before the crash. And so we were at least smart enough to figure out that we couldn't IPO at that point. So that's when we went and said, hey, Yahoo, buy us. So it was announced in June of 2000. It closed August 31st of 2000. So, and here's a tip for everybody. If somebody comes along and says, you're going to get acquired, but you're required to have a lockup for your stock, try to fight that. Because I think Yahoo stock went from $110 at the day of the acquisition to when I could sell it, 58, on its way down to 12. Now, I'm not complaining, trust me, but it's just,
You might want to check with some other folks who were acquired by Yahoo.
I don't, yeah. Again, I'm not complaining, trust me. All right.
Not talking about anyone Leonard. Please continue.
It was a very, very interesting time. Where were we? So Bloglines, the next one, I did $200,000 start to finish. I probably could have done it a lot cheaper because I screwed up. And like I said before, built to flip. Weren't even thinking IPO, weren't thinking anything else. This was a nice thing for somebody to acquire. Again, that was, business model of the time, of the environment. Snap Groups, I've spent $6,000 so far.
Sorry, I know you may not want to get into the details, but there was at least a healthy acquisition of Bloglines in the $2-digit million number or better range, I would guess?
Yes.
Okay. And so $200,000 was the only capital that you took?
Correct.
Nice job.
Thank you.
That's where the clap there.
Very lucky. I mean, very lucky.
There'll be a little execution in there.
So what was the screw up for Bloglines?
I talk about it in the later slide, but the short answer is I own the machines. And if I didn't own the machines, if I had rented, then it would have cost a lot less money. And the thing is with these companies, if you're building something to be acquired, you're not going to get valued on how much hardware you own. It just makes no sense to own it. I mean, besides all the other hassles of having to set up the machines, I was having machines UPS'd to my house, so I'd have all these boxes around that I'd have to configure. I mean, it was a nightmare. Besides the fact having to go to the colo at 2 in the morning to reboot things that wouldn't reboot on their own. Not great. I mean, and I'm not a really good system administrator, so it's don't own your machines is what I'm saying. So, and certainly I don't own them with Snap Groups. So. Now, this is the slide that I was talking about. It's very appropriate for today.
How precious.
Yeah, doing a startup is like riding a roller coaster. I mean, it's or maybe it's like being a manic depressive. I'm not sure, except you can't really have Prozac with it. But it is. I mean, it's these huge highs and these huge lows, and you have to roll with it. I could tell you many stories about. With ONEList, where we had scaling issues where, for the first summer I had to turn off the ability to create new groups because we just couldn't deal with it until we had a new database system built. Or the time that we were hacked and 1,000 groups were deleted. I don't think that's ever been mentioned before. But we were able to recover that and never found out who did it. But you'll have these catastrophes over and over, and you just have to be able to weather them. Maybe it's because I'm generally an optimist, although I'm not sure I am. But do what you can.
So, how much of that do you think is perception versus reality? I mean, not that I've been
That's yeah.
at the same scale of entrepreneur, but I ran a business in the '90s and had a lot of the same insanity. We got our servers stolen New Year's Day, the morning before we were in acquisition process. That's like wonderful. But like a lot of it in hindsight was like, okay, that really wasn't as crazy as I thought it was. It just felt like it was crazy. Sometimes it was, but like a lot of times it was more just my perception of that.
I think that's a very perceptive point. When you're building a startup, I mean, it's your baby. You only want the best for it. And so if something isn't absolutely, completely perfect, I think it tends to magnify your feelings. So I think absolutely, in the grand scheme of things, did anything really horrible happen with ONEList or Bloglines? No, but it just seems like the little things on a day-to-day basis, especially since you're spending so much time on it and just kind of obsessing over it. So.
And I guess, do you feel like having the years behind you adds some perspective, or are there actual more tactical things that you can do to sort of not be quite so insane about that whole process? Do advisors help? Do sort of like talking to other entrepreneurs help? Do just having like two wins behind you help at all?
Yeah, I think there's some technical things, better monitoring, help with that. The experience of going through it, of course, has helped a lot. Trying to, more perspective absolutely does help. I think. One thing I've struggled with doing startups is work-life balance, and I'm not sure that you can have a work-life balance doing a startup, but it is definitely something that perspective has helped me with, and that I'm trying to do more of, or have at least a modicum of a life with this one, and that definitely helps with that. I hope. So I'm going to talk about building the product, some of the nitty-gritty stuff for Lean Startup. So once you've got an idea and decided to do a startup, there are really several steps involved, and I'll talk about how each of those have changed over the last 12 years ago. So another startup commandment. The main point behind this is don't worry about having a completely scalable system right now. Well, I mean, make sure it doesn't crash when you put a plus sign in your email address. But don't worry about scaling issues.
Maybe you should worry a little bit more about scaling.
Yeah. People have been trained over the years to expect scaling issues. And actually, in a kind of weird way, it makes your startup look successful. Regardless of how many users you have, if you have scaling problems, people think you have a successful startup. So you can spend all this time trying to scale it before you launch, but why not launch first?
So wait a second, what I hear you saying is basically engineer for not having scalability so that you have the marketing necessary to raise capital? Is that sort of the story there?
I deny everything. Especially since I am an engineer. No, I think the biggest thing is, it's the most important thing, and I think I talk about this elsewhere, is to just launch the damn thing. It's just you're nothing until you launch. I learned that a very long time ago when I worked at a startup that never launched something. And there's so many benefits to when you actually get something out there. So again, I think that's just the main point of this, is worry less about scaling and worry more about shipping. So just getting a little bit into detail about the tech and how technology has changed over the last 12 years and how I've thought about it. Back in ONEList, when computers had hand cranks on the sides of them and the wheel hadn't been invented yet, in terms of the database, which is the core of your startup, we didn't have too many options. I mean, MySQL had been around, but it really wasn't ready yet, so we had to go with Oracle. And running on big Sun hardware, not cheap. With Bloglines and now with SnapGroups, I mean, the databases have, the free databases have gotten so much better that it just doesn't make any sense to pay for your database in terms of actually the software. Now, you may want to pay for support, and that's one of the reasons why I selected MongoDB for my current database, is that you can actually buy support from them when you need it at 3 in the morning or whatever. But it doesn't make sense to go with a big database on big hardware like it used to be. What else? Talking a little bit about some of the tech that I use with SnapGroups. GitHub is a great source repository service. It's where I store all my source code. It costs $7 a month or whatever, but it backs everything up, and I can access the source code from any machine, so I definitely recommend that. I use Google Apps for email for SnapGroups. There's a free version. They don't like promoting it, but you can find it without too much effort, and that's great for email. And absolutely rent the machines. Like I said before, one of the mistakes with Bloglines is owning the machines, and that's why it costs $200,000. It would have cost significantly less had I rented the machines, and that's what I'm doing with SnapGroups, specifically going to SoftLayer, because that was they were recommended by friends, so they have a decent reputation. Hiring. So, again, we talked a little bit about this. 12 years ago, you needed a big team, you needed an office. Your success was based on how many employees you had. So we had 150 people at ONEList and eGroups. I could never hire as fast as as fast as the VCs wanted, for example. With Bloglines, I had one full-time employee. Several other people worked for stock. And I used a service called Elance to outsource some of the design stuff. I think just some of the graphics at the time. Now with SnapGroups, there have been really the rise of a lot more outsourcing possibilities for lean startups. And so SnapGroups is myself, but it's also my small army. Starting with 99 Designs. Does everybody know about 99 Designs? Yay, nay? So what 99 Designs is, it's good for a couple of different things. If you need a logo or if you need a website design, it's a community of designers. And what happens, say with the logo, if you want a logo done, you put together a project specifying what you want your logo to look like in however specific terms you can come up with. And you put that out, and then designers will actually do logos for you, and then you just pick the one that you want, which is a vastly superior way of getting a logo over, say, selecting a graphic designer and hoping that he comes up with something. It works out much better.
So I've also been a user of 99 Designs, but I will just play devil's advocate there and say there are people who hire designers in-house and have great results with that. But the other point that I wanted to make out was it wasn't, at least for me, there was actually a continuous process of interacting with the designers in the community, and like the 2 or 3 times I've used 99 Designs, I've gotten literally between 50 to 100 designs in like 24 to 48 hours. The more feedback you give them, the more actually you can target that. I almost felt bad for the people who didn't win the eventual thing, and to the point of actually wanting to pay people who didn't actually do the designs that you look at. But I guess the question I have, and maybe this is part of the other wins, is once you got one of the people who had a winning design, did you continue using that person in the future? Did you use them off-site through 99 Designs? And I won't tell the person who's 99 Designs. Turn off the cameras right now. And Matt Mishovich actually has come to some of our meetings, so he's really people out.
Yeah, I mean, 99 Designs is fantastic. So I use them for 2 things, right? So first is the logo, and had amazing success with that. And one tip I'll say with that is when specifying your project, you can pay a little bit more so that your project appears at the top of search results. And I think that really helped me.
A little more.
I think like $10. Yeah, it's not a lot. And so I think for the logo, which you can see up there, I got 75 to 100 responses over the 7-day period, and it is key, as you alluded to give feedback. The designers really thrive on feedback, especially the ones that aren't going to win. They at least want to know that their work's been appreciated, or they want to learn how to become a better logo designer.
So, I mean, I understand that process, how that works for logo and initial maybe concepts and design, but obviously once you get into sort of wireframing, laying out the site, actually building designs into HTML and starting scripting, how did that work? And I guess you were using other services to help you then go through that process?
Why, yes, Dave, I did. No, once I selected a logo, the other service that 99 Designs provides is website design. So you give them a logo and any other things that you can specify and say, I want a web page to look like this. And then again, you have all of these designers submitting website designs, their graphics, and then you pick one. And so I used that. The winner of that process was different than the winner of the logo. And I ended up using that designer. He's an 18-year-old design student in Montreal through the entire site after that. And it's been fantastic. So that's actually worked out really well. So, I don't know, yeah.
So after, I don't know how long you've been working with that person, but is that someone that you feel comfortable working in a virtual sort of long distance interaction, or is that someone that you thought maybe you might actually want to hire full-time at some point, or you're comfortable sort of just continuing that relationship?
I think it works out really well. He bills me by the hour. I don't have a specific amount of work for him. I'll say I need this, and we can iterate through some designs for different websites. There's not enough work for him to be hired on full-time, and he's a college student.
Any concerns if he took a job or got hit by a bus, like how you deal with that?
No, I don't think so, because I have all the original artwork. And so I think that's okay. I think that's worked out really well, actually. So, so the next step after that is, okay, so you've got a website, but it's just a graphic, it's just a picture, it's not actually a website. So you need to have that converted into HTML and CSS and everything, and there are several services that do that for you. The one that I've used is PSD to HTML, and so what that does is you give it a graphic, it gives you back XHTML and CSS, and it's really good hand-done CSS and XHTML. And that actually works really well. Their turnaround's about a day, and they'll iterate things on it for you if you've got questions or if you want some fixes. It's actually worked out really well. And so the last service that I've been using is Odesk. And Odesk has, again, lets you put projects up for many different things, but I've used them for programming mainly. I need a lot of JavaScript work done because I don't really know JavaScript very well, and I didn't have time or didn't have the desire to learn it. So I did 2 projects with Odesk, and one was successful and one was a complete failure. So
Please talk about the fail first.
of course. So there are 2 ways of doing a project on Odesk. One is just putting up your project and having people bid on it, and then selecting somebody and then having that person actually do it. I did that first. That was a complete failure. Code I got back was late. It didn't work very well. It was not coded very well. The second project I did on Odesk, I put together the project, but then I went specifically looking for a service provider to do it. I was looking for somebody who had the best qualifications, the most appropriate qualifications, the best reviews, the most recent work. And so I found somebody, and I asked him to bid on it, and he did, and I've been working with him ever since. He's a This guy's name is Andre, and he's somewhere in Russia, I think. Excuse me. It's actually worked out really well. I give him projects to do. He does them. He sends them back in a couple of days. He works night times in Russia, which equates to roughly mid-morning here. I can tell you one story about him. The other day, I think it was last Friday, he had spent the last 9 hours working on some stuff for me, and we were chatting in a Google Talk chat room. And with ONEList, you can track when somebody is working on your project minute by minute. So I knew that he had worked for the last 9 hours on some JavaScript for me. And so in the chat room, he says, "Oh, and now you should congratulate me." And I thought, well, that's a very weird thing to say. And before I had a chance to ask him what he was talking about, he said, "My wife just gave birth to a baby." And I'm like, "What? You've just spent the last 9 hours working on my project. I know this for a fact." And he's like, "Yeah, I saw her this morning, and I'll go back tomorrow." So I felt a little bad. I gave him a bonus.